Today we have the honor of sitting down for a conversation with Laura Lentz. This episode is a sequel to another conversation that we just aired recently with Laura's husband, Carl. Together they were part of the leadership team at Hillsong from 2010 to 2020, a faith-based community in New York City. Due to their success, Hillsong became a fixture in the mainstream media, and nearly 10,000 people were attending their Sunday gatherings on a weekly basis, which is unprecedented in a city like New York. But in the fall of 2020, everything came crashing down and it was revealed that Carl had been unfaithful. This was only the tip of the iceberg as more allegations came out, and in the following months, Carl admitted to additional affairs. The affairs were a surprise to Laura, and as a public figure, she had to endure the humiliation of this all unfolding in the public eye. 4 years later, Laura has been through hell and back and lives to tell about her experience. So in this conversation, we unpack the topic of infidelity and all the complexity that comes along with it. We leave no stone unturned, discussing the trauma that comes about when you have been betrayed, navigating the decision to leave or go, and all the little micro moments that often lead up to an affair taking place. As a media company that talks about the mind, body, and spirit frequently, sex is a big topic for us. It's estimated that cheating occurs in roughly 50% of relationships, and we found Laura's insights on the topic to be eye-opening. You may be listening today because you are currently involved in a situation that involves cheating and you're trying to navigate all the emotions while deciding what to do next. Or maybe you're looking to educate yourself more about the topic or simply avoid a situation like this happening to you in the future. On those fronts, we believe this conversation will make a big difference in your life and contribute to healing and growth in your relationships. So without further ado, Laura Lentz. Laura, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I just admire the strength and courage that it takes to share your story. I mean, it's like a miracle that you're like even sitting here doing this conversation right now. And obviously, you know, as we talked about Carl in his conversation, I think, you know, it is hard to be in his position where like all of this was public, but then there's such an extra layer with you of like, in the sense that this is just something that happened to you like unexpectedly. Mm-hmm. And, you know, then to have it be a public figure and just like have all this come out in the news, like we were just talking about earlier, I was like, I can't imagine like what that would be like. But now you're here and like talking about it on the other side.
Yeah, it kind of feels nice being on the other side of it now.
Yeah.
When you're in it, it's definitely it's a lot to take.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this side being on, you know, being able to speak on what we want to talk about and having our voice again is kind of, it's kind of a cathartic feeling of just being able to get it out. And it's every time we talk about it, I feel like it's just more healing. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. I mean, and the power of a kind of a platform or having your story be a source of redemption for other people, obviously, is the stories that come out of it. And so how many people have reached out to you, like personally, or women, or that have been through similar situations since this has happened?
I was telling your wife earlier that the amount of DMs I get on social media or just emails or, you know, just people reaching out to me however they can, it's literally every day. And it's been like that since it happened back in 2020. And it's kind of shocking because you know that infidelity happens and people, you know, there's so much betrayal that can happen in a marriage or relationships. But to actually hear people's stories and the fact that my story is resonating with someone else, it was a lot. Like it's really sad. And then people asking me, you know, how I did that or how did I trust again or how did I get over this and that. And sometimes it can be a little triggering or just a little too much and I'll have to get off like, I can't answer that today or just depending on what it is. But there's so many women especially, but men as well, that go through the same thing, if not a lot of stories are way worse than mine, way worse than our story, but ours just happened to be public. So being able to help people, and I think that was the reason for us, my main reason for helping with the podcast, with Carl's podcast, was for that reason of like, I can't get to everyone. And I feel like there's obviously a space for this. So for us, we're like, okay, it's been a bummer that we've gone through this, but if God can use our story, then we're here for it. So that's kind of been,
Yeah.
that's been the beautiful part of our story, is being able to bring some hope to other people.
Yeah, I mean, the statistics around infidelity are all over the place, but the relevance of it, I mean, 50%,
Yeah.
I guess, maybe, of people have either been unfaithful or like there's an act of adultery that's been committed against them. And so the relevance of the topic is just so heightened for like so many people. And you have to figure out what do you do next? Like how do you deal with this? How do you navigate these situations? And so I think if we travel back a little bit, so we got Carl's take in the last episode, but you know, the day that kind of everything fell apart, like where were you? What happened? What was communicated to you? Can you take me through that?
Yeah. It was I remember the days, but I don't remember a lot about after the fact, but I do remember, you remember the most random things when your body, is hit with something like this. It was a Sunday night. He had gone into work to the office in New York to meet with a couple of our staff. And he was like, he had said, we're going to go talk to them about, we had a conference coming up or something. I was like, okay, cool. And then a couple of hours later, he was like, hey, we're coming to pick you up. We're going to go back to the office and we're just going to talk about some stuff with that. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I get in the car, like they come pick me up. There's 3 of us in the car. And it's our CFO, no, sorry, not our CFO, our COO and one of our other lead guys that we did a lot of life with. And they're in the car and I'm just yapping like I do, like having fun with everyone. And it was just this weird kind of vibe in the car. And I was like, that's weird. Anyway, we get to the office and our friends go to one room and Carl's like, hey, come to my office for a second. I need to ask you something or talk to you about something. I'm like, okay. And I could just see as soon as he shut the door, his face there was just something happening. And I don't remember a lot, but I just remember him saying, I was like, what's going on? Like, this is weird. And he just said, I've been unfaithful to you. And then I don't remember what unfolded after that, like what the explanation was, but it was a good hour and a half probably of just us in the room, me crying, me in shock, me trying to understand, confusion, so many emotions all in one. And then going straight to, what about my kids? It was just a very overwhelming sense of just shock and just confusion. Those were the 2 things that came to mind straight away. I was just like so confused. I didn't understand how or why this would happen to me. So it was a lot. And then after that, we went back we were staying in Brooklyn at the time because we'd just sold our house in New Jersey. We were trying to figure out what we were going to do next. So we were staying at a friend's apartment. And so that night I was in major shock. And we just laid in bed. I didn't sleep at all that night. And I got up early the next morning because I just couldn't sleep. And I just got in my car and I drove to Montauk to see some of my friends out there. And I just stayed there for a couple of days, called my parents who were in Australia and had to tell them what had happened. And it was awful. I don't even know how to put it into words. Like, there was just so much emotion. And then after that, it was just days and days and days of more things coming out, more meetings we had to have, like getting on a Zoom call with our pastors and leaders in Australia and people that needed to know what was happening. And then he would have to explain the story again. So then I would have to hear more and more. You know, it was just like these waves. And the only way I could explain it is it was just felt like a wave just being hit I was just getting hit with these waves every time of just shock and grief and brokenness and the betrayal and confusion. I don't know. It was just all of those things in one. And it was just months. It felt like months of that after that. It was just, I didn't know up from down really, because at the same time one of my kids was struggling with her mental health. She was in a teen like mental hospital in Connecticut. So we were dealing with her as well. So it was just like so much happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
the short, like kind of condensed version of what
I can't imagine
explain.
like how like traumatic that was. I mean, like was it within that like first meeting that you had with him, or was it like in the days that came out? Like when did it hit you the realization like this is going to be like a very public thing?
I didn't think about that part because when you're in what we were in, you know that people know of you or whatever, but you just don't realize the impact of it. And so it was the pressure of our old church, like asking Carl to put a statement out and all of these things, having us sign, NDAs and having us sign the contracts to be, not fired, but what's the word? Resign. I had to resign and all these things. You're not thinking straight. And so you're just doing whatever is needed. Looking back, there was a few things we would never have done, but you just don't, your brain literally is, when your brain's in such a traumatic state, it just shuts down in so many different ways. And it's trying to protect you, but it was very overwhelming and very painful. And then the public side was awful because then, we had paparazzi and people following us and Carl, and then it became public. And then when it became public, he'd already gone. He was gone. Like he went to On-Site, it's like a trauma like therapy place that he went to for 4 days and did an intensive there. So then I was by myself with the kids in Brooklyn and just trying to figure out what we were doing. And so it was just a lot. Like the whole thing was just crazy.
Yeah. I think when you hear a story about like cheating and infidelity, obviously there's the shock of that moment. And it's like the most natural thing in the world to fixate on that moment. But what I've learned from Lights On and your story and everything, obviously there's that one moment is often made possible by hundreds or thousands of little moments that came before it. And so I think for people who are listening on that have either been cheated on or trying to make sense of their own story, I think, if they heard a little bit about like what was happening prior to this, obviously he had the knowledge of what was going on. But one thing that you said that was surprising to me in some sense is in a recent episode Light On, you said prior to this whole incident, your marriage was good, I guess, in some senses. So help me understand that part.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you've got a busy life and you're in like parent, mum, pastor, church, like working with stuff. So you just like, our life was good, like we had our lanes that we worked in. We worked well together with our church and our staff. We were great parents, like co-parenting, like doing all of that. And you just get in these like, just in these moments of just like, you just got to get through the day and do what you got to do. He was traveling a lot. I would have my, me doing the kids, he would travel, then I would look after church stuff while he was gone or whatever, so we worked well together, and our marriage was, from the outside, would look happy and fun, and, sex life was great, like all of these things. There was nothing like crazy or like off, do you know what I mean? So when I hit with, he's been cheating, I was like that, and it wasn't like there was some things that had happened where I was like, as a wife, you have these intuitions of like something's not right. But I could never put my finger on it. And if I even tried to question anything, I would get shut down or lied to. And so and then also in a marriage, as a woman, you want to believe and you want to trust. And so then you put that aside. And so you just keep trucking along, and we had so much going on in our life that you don't have enough time to stop. And we didn't have an outlet for any sort of help we did. We could have if we wanted it. But when you're in a position of leadership like we were, it's hard to figure out who you can trust or who you can talk to. And we didn't really have those leaders or like staff, like our own pastors. No one was asking you, how's your marriage? How are you guys doing? And it was always like, what was coming next? And you guys are doing great. Like, let's keep moving. And
more.
Yeah, just more. Because you're part of this machine. It was just life for us, So there wasn't really anything that was like shocking. And you have your normal, marriage fights and your things that you have to deal with, but it was nothing like I'm leaving, or like there was never anything like that. And so that was where the confusion for me came in. Because when you're dealing with someone like he was at the time, and in addiction and dealing with betrayal and all the things he was doing and the secrets and the lies, that's exactly what it is. There's secrets that he's holding that I had no idea about.
Yeah. And
there's no way to get into unless someone's going to open up their life to you. And he didn't do that, So, that's what I meant by that.
What words would you use to describe Carl as a husband before like this incident happened?
Before, he was always, as a husband, he was very protective, and always gave me some direction and where I needed to go. And like, he's a great leader, and a great protector of our family, and an amazing dad, like present when he could be. But looking back, you see all the things and all the little like red flags, all the little things you go, oh my gosh, that was so unhealthy, or like him promising things to the kids and then like not being able to show up because this thing came up for church, or like this, he had to go do this. And, just little things where you're like, life is so different now. And the priority of me and our kids is completely shifted. So he was always so goal orientated and focused on what we needed to be doing as a church and with people. And a lot of our life was taken by helping other people, which, can put your own life and marriage on the back burner.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it was.
Yeah. I mean, in talking with him, it seemed like, Hillsong in general, it was like kind of a runaway train type of thing, where it's just like bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and more and more and more and more and more, which you alluded to a little bit. And so do you feel like as Hillsong's profile grew, you playing in 2010, then 2015, 2020, do you feel like its growth like affected your relationship at all?
Oh, I'm sure it did. Because we started on our back foot really when we started the church. Our first gatherings were over 1,000 people, and then it just grew and grew, and we had to do more services and create more. Like, you get all these people with needs, and then you want to try and meet those needs as a pastor or as a leader, and then you get, it just spirals, and it's like, when is this going to end? And then, you've got the pressure of it being global, and then Carl, it starts to get, notoriety of like who he is, and then the people that start coming and the celebrity, whatever it was. And it was a lot, but at the time it was fun and we enjoyed it. We loved every moment of it. And then it probably got to, it would have been around 2017, I would say, 2018, when we started to really get emotionally just getting tired. And I could tell it was the stress on him and the burnout that was starting to happen on him was what I would notice. And then that brings a lot of pressure, to what you're trying to do. And I think he always felt he would let people down or disappoint people if he wasn't able to, keep up that pace. And it's not realistic and not sustainable in what we were doing. But again, you get like, even if you try to put your hand up, it was like, nope, keep going. Like, here's another conference. Let's start in Boston. Let's do like all these, let's do Connecticut church. And it was like, we can't even like do New York. Like, it was a lot, you know, like it got up to 8 or 9 services in the first 4 years. And so then going to bigger, bigger theaters or bigger areas, and then going to the Hammerstein Ballroom and all
Did
these
he have
places.
to preach 8 times?
Yeah.
8 times?
Yeah. When in the first 4 years, we would end up going, so we would be in Irving Plaza and Gramercy Theatre. They're both about, I think they would hold about 1,000 people, maybe 1,200, something like, they would jam people in. And they would be going simultaneously all day. So we'd start, Irving Plaza would be at 10 o'clock, then Gramercy would start at 11, then back to...
And he was just...
And he would just go back and forth.
Oh.
So he would jump off the stage, go and preach at Gramercy, go back to Irving. We'd have a couple of hours off maybe in the middle of the day. Then he would start again. So this is where that, when he talks about his drug addiction, some of that is because of that. He was so tired, and he had to keep going. It's so crazy to look back at some of that time now and see how unhealthy it is. But when you're in it, you're like, the church is growing. This is beautiful. People are coming, and he would feel the pressure of the team being like, hey, there's still 500 people in the line outside. They couldn't get into this service. And so then we would just randomly do another service. So Gramercy Theatre, we would be doing a 9:45-ish service would be the last service of the day. And then you're not getting home till 11:30.
Wait, 9:45 at night?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So that was number 8 or 9 services, on a Sunday. So,
I think when people think about a pastor or church leader or something like that, I think you lose context because when you're at the size of leadership that you guys were at, right, and there's 10,000 people coming every single week. You're talking about, you're rivaling someone who's a Fortune 500 CEO with thousands and thousands of employees in a company,
right? But
we don't. Even in those contexts, that can be really unhealthy and often is, but we don't give it the same level of respect.
No,
of,
it doesn't get the same.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of medical stuff that they've done research on now with when you are a public speaker and how much exertion goes on in your physical body, and they say it's an 8-hour physical work trade job, digging ditches or something like that. It's a lot on your mind and then your body. And so then by Monday, Tuesday, he was just out of it because Mondays he's completely wiped from preaching for how many hours,
it's
14
exhausting.
hours all day. And so it's just a lot. But you're getting all this praise of wow, the church is growing. It must be a good thing. It's not necessarily a good thing, when it's unhealthy for yourself, But again, there was no one protecting him in that space.
So as all this is happening, did you ever have any previous knowledge of anything that was going on or affairs or anything like that?
Nope.
So this was just a complete blindside.
Yeah. I knew that there was things, but I could never put my finger on what it was because I was always just lied to about it.
Both you and Carla have talked very openly about gaslighting was a big feature of your relationship. And so I think a lot of people know what that term is, but what does that term mean and how did that practically manifest in your relationship?
It was if I would try to ask a question or inquire about something, that I would kind of have a intuition on or something's not right, it just gets turned back on you. So then after a while you start to feel crazy, oh, I must be making this up. It's all in my head. And it's how could you say that? Why would you think that? And then you start going, oh yeah, why would I think that? So it's just, that's gaslighting. It's this, it gets turned around on you. And then when you finally, you start to feel crazy or I'm not going to bring that up because I know that maybe I'm just not thinking straight.
Yeah.
And that's what happens.
Such a complicated place to be, right? Because they're if you're in marriage, obviously you want to be trusting, you want to be loving and caring. And there are instances probably of people that are paranoid for one reason or another. There isn't anything that's going on.
Right.
And so for that to be the whole background is very complicated.
It was complicated. And it wasn't always it wasn't that was all the time. You know what I mean? So it was just there would just be moments of it, and then it would be beautiful again, or like everything was fine. So it was just, and life was so crazy, you just keep going. So, and you got kids that you're raising, and I think a lot of people can relate to that, of being confused or like not knowing. So on this side of it now, I can always see now the things that I should have confronted on, or I should have like pushed more about, or I should have got help and therapy for. But it just was never an issue. It wasn't in our church culture to talk to someone about marriage or to get help on anything. Because again, when you're in a place of like a public figure and there's things that you're like, we should probably get help on this. It's like, but who do you go to? Who can you trust? And so that plays into it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so
good.
it was a lot.
So going back to the fall of 2020, the trauma complication of this, like how does one even like process like such a thing?
It was a lot of phone calls with therapists, and the first person I talked to, she was amazing. She helped with the initial kind of few weeks, and she was the one that would just tell me things like, you're going to go into shock, or you are in shock, and your brain is not, processing properly. So I need you to remember to eat. I need you to try and sleep. Real practical things like that was the first help that I was getting, because again, when you're in a traumatic space like that, you cannot process properly. You are in shock. Your body and your brain goes into this space of like, okay, how is it going to protect me? And so all these things start shutting down. So that was I think some of the best advice I got at first was that don't make any big decisions was another one. So don't just, I couldn't anyway at the time because we're in New York and I've got kids and a kid in hospital, but like, where would I go? What would I do? None of those were in the picture at the time. It was just eating and sleeping and talking to therapists and like just getting through that initial painful. It was probably like 4 or 5 weeks, because then we were also moving and trying to figure out where we're going to move. And thankfully we had the right people in our corner helping us with some of those decisions, because I couldn't process any of it.
What about just like existing in the same room as like the person that hurt you?
Yeah.
All the while like making these big life decisions, like you went from New York to like LA and then Florida, and like, how did you do that? Because I imagine that would be like such a difficult thing.
It was, but at the time I wanted to get out of New York because for a few years I had felt a change was coming anyway. And I'm from Australia originally, and I really longed to be near the water again. And so when this situation happened, I knew straight away, I want to go to LA. I just want to be near the beach. I want to be in a place where I can just sit and heal. And thankfully, LA was a great spot for us at the time, like going, and we were there for 6 months, and it was a beautiful space for us because, and again, I don't remember a lot of it, and the kids don't remember a lot of that 6 months because everyone was in such a traumatic place. But I do remember every morning being able to go and sit and breathe in the ocean air and write in my journal and do my therapy and all the things. And we didn't know anyone, in where we lived. So it was just a beautiful time for us to be able to spend some time together and heal, and really get that space with each other and with our family.
When I think about that time of healing for you afterwards, it kind of makes me think of another guest we had on the show. So she's a Harvard doctor who's like a stress expert, and she wrote a book earlier this year on the subject, and she talked about this idea of like a delayed stress response. And so she talked about during acute crises, your brain rises up to meet the challenge because as humans, we're hardwired for survival and self-preservation. We always find a way to address our immediate needs. But once that acute threat has passed and you feel psychologically safe, the dam breaks, you let your guard down, and your true emotions come to the surface. It's a deluge. And so I wanted to see if you resonated
100%
with that.
100%. There was times where like I'd just be making the bed and then I would just lose it over like just the smallest thing. And it was just things like that, like the stress and all of that just coming out of me, and the anxiety that I would feel every day and the thoughts I would have every day. It was just like this constant. It was a constant. It was so tiring. My brain was so tired. Like there was so many moments by myself I would just break down. Like going to the bathroom, I would just sit and cry, like, or like lean up against the wall and cry by myself. Like just little things where your body, it's like it's getting it out when you're in a safe space to do that. And then he, before he went to rehab, so the first couple of months in LA, once we got settled in California, I was able to go to on-site and go and do some of my own work. And I did an intensive there for 4 days. And that's where a lot of things changed for me. And it was all about me finding my voice again and finding feeling in my body again. So that was a really beautiful time for me to be able to like release a lot of pain. Oh, it makes me emotional thinking about it because I don't really think about it anymore because I've moved so far through it. But yeah, those initial months are just exhausting. And your brain is finally able to like process a lot of things. And so having that space to just be able to process, I didn't have to worry about the kids because I was away from them. I was able to like, I knew that Carl was at home with the kids, so I was able to go and just like get a lot of it out, you know, and you do a lot of work in the betrayal, trauma, codependent space of just like figuring out a lot of things. And I didn't realize how much I'd kind of lost myself, you know. So yeah, it was a lot of work. And going back to that, like your body does just, it just releases this stuff out of you once it feels safe, 100%. So I would love to read that book.
What do you mean that you felt like you lost yourself?
I was I was a really good wife, really great mom, and really great at helping other people. And I was pretty bad at putting my needs in front of anyone else's. So when you get to a place of like, when you're able to really think through some of the things you're going through, and sitting with this therapist, you know, him asking me the simplest things, like we walked into a room and he was like, okay, where do you want to sit in the room? This is where we're going to be and do our therapy for a few days. Where would you like to sit? You've got a choice of a cushion or a chair, or, you know, you can sit on this around the table, whatever. And I was like, I don't know. I don't care, wherever. And he kept pushing me like, where would you, no, you need to make the choice of where you want to sit. And I'm like, I honestly don't care. Like, just tell me what do you want me to do? And it was that type of stuff. Like and then when I finally picked, it was about 20 minutes of this going back and forth of like, okay, I'll sit here. And then it was, where do you want me to sit in the room? And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't care where you sit. And he's like, well, I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to feel safe. So where would you like me to sit? I can sit here. I can sit in front of you cross-legged, or I can sit over here against the window. And it was just, so that was the beginning of me having to voice what I wanted. And it was 4 days of that. It was really exhausting, but it was it was really freeing. And I came back, and Carl can tell you this too, but I came back a very different person. A lot more like assertive and ready to like just fight for what I wanted and what I needed.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's still a process. There's still days where I have to like voice what I want or what I need. And he does it a lot. He'll be like, what do you need from me today? And my initial is to go, I don't know, I'm good, whatever, it's all good. But I have to like sink deep and go, what do I need today? So I have to take the time to think about what I want and what I need.
So when you think about like Laura before and Laura after, I mean, a lot of people in those early days would make the immediate decision to leave and separate. And the Laura before, you said in another, I think, episode of your podcast, I would look at other people and say I would have never stayed if that would have happened to me, but it's very different when you're in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you explain that to me a little bit?
Yeah, I think whenever you see someone get cheated on or hurt like that, you're like, that would never happen. Like, I would never let that happen to me. Like, I would never stay. I'm out. Like, I would be out. When you're in it, it's a very different feeling. It's a very different, and every story is different. Every situation is different. So you can't judge one person from another. But for me, I wanted to stay because I wanted to give him a chance to prove that he was different. And with what the information that I had got of some of the reasons why some of this had happened and why he was so broken, I really felt in my heart that I wanted to stay to heal firstly for the both of us, because I'd seen a lot of women leave and then they lived in this bitter, hateful, just hard-hearted state. And I knew I didn't want to live that way because I'd seen that enough. And so I got some good advice from someone to say, again, don't make any big decisions for a while. And then another one was that a great way to heal, for me, a good way to heal was to stay and heal together. So I was able to process a lot of the things that I needed to hear, the confusion that I had or the questions that I had. And he was able to answer a lot of those for me. And so that was very healing. I think if I had up and gone, I wouldn't be where I am today in the process of healing. And so I appreciated that. And I knew that if he, with the tools that he had gotten from, his therapy and going to rehab, I knew what was expected of him. And I knew the things he had to do every day. And I had made a vow to myself and to my kids, if I didn't see those things happening, then I would leave. I knew what was the boundary lines for me.
Yeah.
And in the 4 years, he has always shown up and he has always done the things that he's said he would do. And he has done the work that he needs to do every day to show up for me and for my kids. And he has built trust and continues to build trust, which is basically, it's a place where I feel safe. And when I feel safe and when I feel connected to him, just eye to eye, then that's where the trust is built. And so that has been the process for me of being able to stand next to him and to stay.
Yeah, you guys were talking recently about how, when a situation like this happens, it's not that trust is built, period. It's that trust is continually building. It's like a spectrum. So can you tell me about that a little bit in your relationship?
Again, when I went to on-site, my therapist did a experiment, I guess, or just a visual for me, where he gave me a jar, like a glass cup, and it was filled with Skittles. And he said, this is your marriage before. And it's built with all this, what was trust and all the things that you had built for 18 years at the time, 18 years of your relationship. And then he took it and he dropped it and it smashed into, went everywhere, all over the floor. And there was Skittles everywhere. And he explained to me that that's what happens in betrayal when that one moment happens and that shock hits your body. That's what happens in your life, that all of that was built is completely shattered. And then he gave me a new jar and he said, and this is what you have, and this is what Carl will have to do to rebuild trust. And it'll be a Skittle at a time. It'll be one Skittle at a time. And that was a really good visual for me because it helped me to understand, that it could be built again. Because when you're in it, you're like, how can I ever trust this man again, And so having that visual for me had really carried me through a lot of the dark days of going, okay, we're building trust every day and he is doing the tiniest things. It could be half a Skittle today, but he's doing it, And so that was the beautiful part about trust being built. And I think it's very frustrating because you want to be able to just it's not like an instant snap of, oh, I trust you again. It was days and weeks and months and years and still is, of building trust. And it looks different now than it did 4 years ago. So it was little things 4 years ago, like if he was riding his bike down to the beach, hey, I'm going to go down to the beach. And then he would get to the beach and then he would call me and say, hey, I'm going to go walk to, the 7-Eleven to get a Coke. Okay. But it was those little, like him calling me or like letting me know every step that he was taking was little pieces of trust being built again. Now he doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to be like, hey, I'm walking 10 steps and I'm going to go hit,
Yeah.
But he still will do those things. Like if he's going to, hey, I'm going to the mall. Okay, see you in a little bit or whatever. And then if he stops at the gas station, I'm stopping at the gas station. Like he still does those things just out of habit. And I appreciate it, but it's also not needed for me anymore.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, it absolutely was needed.
Now, obviously the public made their judgments on Carl, but did they also make their judgments on you? Like, did you have people shaming you for your decision to stay? And like, what happened there?
I think I had a lot more than I knew of. I didn't hear a lot of it, but in some of the things that were said, and I think just by people's or some friendships even, I think there was judgment there, and it was seen by them not showing up for me. So that I think me staying, because it isn't for everyone, and not everyone can support that.
It's so sad.
Yeah, I think I lost a lot of people because of that decision. And that's okay. Like it's been that was a process as well to go through. But I think a lot of people, and there was a narrative of that, I think a little bit of, and it kind of felt like that even after we did the documentary and a few things like that, it's always like there was some headlines of like she stayed, Laura stayed or whatever. And I wanted to, this was another reason why we wanted to do the podcast as well, is to be able to explain, I didn't just like roll over and take it all, it wasn't like I didn't just forgive him and that was it. It's been such a process of like doing the hard days and the work and all the things. Like it's not just an easy decision to stay. And there's also too hard. Like there's two, what's the word? There's two hards that I could have chosen. There's the hard to stay,
yeah.
2 paths, yeah. So I could stay and it's hard, or I'm leaving and that's hard. I've got kids, I've got teenagers, I've got, have to start a life again or whatever, but to stay or divorce, they're both really hard. So I just had to choose which hard I was going to go with. And I chose the one to stay,
Yeah.
And seeing such a change in him and understanding some of the reasons why. It was never an excuse and it was never the reason why I stayed, but it was definitely it made sense to me, some of the things that he had gone through, and knowing our story, and only I would know that, the things that we had gone through and the things we've talked about over the years and the things and all of that, only I can make that choice. And I chose to stay, and some people love that and other people hate it. And then you've got people who are like, you did the godly thing to stay, and I'm like, I did not. Like I didn't have to stay, and I hate that for people because I don't want women to think that they should stay in a relationship. So my biggest thing for people is if they ask, how do I know if I should stay? I'm always like, it totally depends on his responses and his journey to what he's gone through and the way he shows up for the wife. And I think it's real easy to tell if a guy is doing the work and if he's willing to change. or to fix things. And if he's not, it's out, you know. So I don't think it was, you know, a big, noble, godly decision for me to stay. It was just he was doing the work that he needed to do. I was doing my work that I needed to do. And when we both, so saving our marriage wasn't the goal, you know. The goal was healing in myself and in him, you know. And then as that went, we were able to get real close.
I think it's really important that you're talking about. You don't want to prescribe your situation over anyone, and it's kind of weird, or that someone say, "Oh, it's godly," because I don't think you can make a case spiritually, psychologically, whatever. There's no right move in this situation. I mean, obviously, you guys are leading a church, and even the same scriptures, right? Like that is the thing that they talk about. If that happened, like you can leave if you want. And so I think there's just but the wisdom that you can extract from your situation that help a lot of people is in the details that you're talking about. And so you talked about that process a little bit. And so the more visceral reactions in the earlier days, or maybe in the following months, or even the first year, right? Was there ever a temptation for like revenge? I think that's such like a natural human reaction of like, you did this to me, I'm going to go cheat on you, or I'm going to have my own affair with something. I've always kind of been curious about that reaction. Someone who has been cheated on. Did that happen for you?
I think it's definitely a natural response, and it definitely flies through your head. For me, it did. It's like I could totally like go do whatever I want, and there should be nothing that like he can say. But for me, it was like, why would I want to bring any more pain into my situation?
Yeah,
and you know, make it more complicated. Like it's for me, I'm not built that way. Some people are, and I'm like, great, like do that, you know, whatever you want to do. But I just don't see I wouldn't see the health in any of that at all. Yeah.
That's good.
I'm not really that. I'm not a revengeful person either, though. That's not really my.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like that. It's an eye for an eye type of thing,
exactly.
which doesn't really promote healing.
No.
Even though it is kind of like that visceral, like
100%
reaction for people.
And it wasn't like I just, you know, was all sweet about it either. Like there was days I was very angry, you know, and I would have to just tell him, I'm angry at you today. I can't look at you today. And he was okay with that. So those things, being able to be honest with how I was feeling. And again, if there was a different response than that would be a little red flag for me. And that's what I say to other women as well. Like if there's ever any defense in a man, when you have to, you know, say things like, I'm angry at you, or why did you do that? And you might have asked 100 times, you know, he can't get defensive because he's got to answer those questions forever if he needed to, you know.
But you did get a lawyer at one point and start separating your bank accounts. So can you explain to me the process of how that happened?
Yeah. So I got to Florida and I started a new therapist. She specializes in marriage and betrayal trauma. And so her first meeting with me, and she's a Christian, but she, you know, when you're in therapy like that, they don't, you know, just give you scripture and tell you do this and that, which I think a lot of, you know, just pray about it, whatever. I didn't need that type of therapy. I wanted someone that was going to give me tools to heal and tools to like fix my head and my body, you know, because I was just so exhausted. And so the first thing she asked me was that. It was my first meeting with her, and she was like, okay, well, do you have a divorce lawyer? And I'm like, no, like we're doing well and, you know, things are good and we're healing, blah, blah, blah. But she's like, yes, but you've got to understand you're married to an addict and you need to be prepared. And at first I was very offended. And then as I thought about it, I was like, that's probably a bit of a codependent thing to like be protecting of. So I was like, okay. So I thought through some of that. I got advice from a divorce lawyer, and she also advised me to start getting my own bank account. Never had that because, you know, Christian couples, like you all your money
Merge
goes
everything,
together.
yeah.
Everything is together. We're never getting separated. You know, you're married for life type. That was how we all grew up, right? And so that was weird for me at first, putting my own stuff. And when I told Carl, he was very supportive of these decisions as well, because of his own therapy. You know, he's doing his work, and he's like, yeah, you should have your own stuff. And it gave me a sense of, I think, again, empowerment over myself and for who I wanted to be and finding myself. And so getting my own bank account and then starting my own little business of interior design and stuff like that, just little things like that. Well, actually big things. They're kind of big.
Yeah.
Because I never would have done that stuff before any of this. And so being able to have that, not separation, but just that my own individuality outside of my marriage and outside of like it being, you know, me and him, is kind of like, it was kind of empowering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. And so I think a lot of people are interested in the kind of healing agents of your relationship. And so, you know, obviously you're sitting here talking about this now. So like, it seemed like it was a progression, but was there like a moment where you felt like the relationship was turning, and what were those, tell me a little bit about those like boundaries that you put in place that you wanted to see?
Oh gosh, some of the boundaries, I mean, it was definitely a progression of things, and things changed. So in the beginning, you know, it was like the things I needed to check in with him like every 2 hours at home, because the anxiety and the feelings and the thoughts and all of this stuff would just churn in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so at first we would have to have like, at lunch, I'd have to sit with him and see his eyes, like have eye time, and just be like, and we would have these little exercises that we would do, like, how are you feeling right now, and what can I do for you right now? Like just these little tools that we would use to be able to express how we were feeling, apart from, we weren't allowed to use good or great or fine. You know, you have to go a little deeper with your thoughts. And so there was some really cool things that we would do in that space, like how was I feeling emotionally? How was I feeling physically? Like how was I feeling sexually? How was I feeling? So there was like 4 things that we would do. And you would have to say, you know, I'm feeling anxious right now, or I'm feeling hopeful, but also I'm in a lot of pain today, or I'm feeling distant from you, or, you know, whatever those things were. Those were really helpful, especially for me being, you know, quite codependent, and him being codependent, because you want to control the other person's feelings and you don't want to hurt their feelings. And so being able to say honestly how I was, again, all those little things build trust, and these things that was the type of tools that we would use to heal and to get closer to each other. And it actually makes you feel more intimate with the person when you're able to express how you're feeling, or how you're looking at the world today, or whatever it is, you know. So at first, those were the type of things that were really practical that would get us through the day.
Yeah.
And then things like him being on his phone, like there was those, like I would have to say, hey, what are you doing, or what are you looking at? Or he wouldn't be on his phone for certain amount of the day, and just little things like that where you're so like everything could be a trigger, which is kind of a buzzword right now, but like it was just anything could set you off, you know. And so, or him being too quiet, I would be like, oh my God, what's he thinking? What's he doing? Because a lot of his processes were in his own head, from like how he did church life to what he was feeling or what he was doing or what, you know, his next moves were. So both of us being able to communicate with each other, those were some huge tools for us.
Yeah. It's really good. I mean, it's so connecting, like just so connecting, and it makes total sense to me. And I've studied the science of like attachment theory, and there's like obviously the trauma response that you've been through, and so like it's the most natural thing to want to feel securely attached to another individual.
Yeah.
And so like when that is broken, it's like you're anxiously attached.
Yeah.
And so you need to like develop these like rhythms to kind of like establish that we're secure, and then like you kind of like build
Yeah.
upon that. And so
Well, that's what, that was the thing. Like, and it started with these, I needed those little things at first. Like, I needed him to say where he was going. And then it got to the point, like, when we got to Florida, he got a 9-to-5 job. And that was another hurdle for me that I really had to like take it in, because he's gone 9 to 5 now, and he's in an office with men and women, and I don't know where he is or what he's doing. And so again, that was, and I could have easily like, I can't have that happen, like, which would have been crazy, because I have to, grow and get back into the real world, right?
Yeah.
So that was hard. And then he had to start traveling for work. So then that was another process of like, okay, how are we going to do this, And him having some great tools that he was given on how he would help me feel safe and feel like, trustworthy and all of those things. Like, it was like just a process. It's funny to go back and think about, actually, all the things that you, like the littlest things, he would be like, when he would travel, he would give me a printed out itinerary of where he was staying, the phone call, like the phone of where he was at, and his own phone number, and then like who he was going to be with, and then the time schedule of like wherever he was going to be with conference of whatever he was doing. Like, so all of those things were super helpful. And it sounds crazy, but when you're in when there's been so much broken trust and betrayal, you need all that stuff, because otherwise you live, like for me, my body would react.
Yeah.
As you know, Body Keeps the Score, all those amazing books, but I had no idea about any of that. So learning all those things. So when I would feel anxiety in my throat, like, I'd be like, okay, why am I feeling that right now? And I'd have to go in and like sit in that for a second and go, okay, why am I feeling like that? Oh, it's because I haven't heard from him for whatever, an hour, or I don't know, little things that you just take for granted, I think, in a normal relationship.
It really doesn't sound crazy to me at all. I mean, we have a close friends that just had a newborn, right? And so like when there's like a bond being established between a mother and a baby, right? It's like it's like almost you're going back to that like original state, but like you're paralleling that with like a marriage relationship. Is like you want to feel like you're building, you're developing a secure thing. And then obviously with a kid, or in that instance, like the goal is that like you're going to have enough security in your relationship with your parents and the trust that you could not be in the same room with them, or you could be away from them and still feel like united and secure. So like those things actually make total sense to me. So one big thing that you guys have talked about is like how important is it to know all the details of the infidelity? This is like a big topic for people. Yeah. And so I think there's two things, right? So it's like, if you don't know the full extent, like, is there always a voice in the back of the head of like, I don't know something? And if you do, then it's just like, it'd be very like traumatic. And so like you guys have talked about disclosure. So what would you say about that? Yeah,
I think the disclosure part is super important. And it's important for both parties, it's important for the woman, and it's important for the man telling the woman, because he has to sit there and face the person that he's hurt. And I think in that space, it's a good reminder for them to look at that person as they have to tell. And you should only ever do this in a safe space with your therapist. I would never recommend doing anything like this, just on your own, off the cuff kind of. So that's a whole process when you have to do a disclosure type thing. But I think you have to ask yourself, why do I need these details? Like, what details am I looking for, and why? Because it can be super damaging, and there's some things you want to know as well. So it's like, it's quite the balance of some of that. And you can ask and do whatever you want, but there's also going to be on the other side of that. You got to realize that you're going to have to like either relive that, or you're going to re-traumatize yourself. And what's healthy for me, and why do I need to know some of these details? And I definitely wanted to know some things, But in terms of nitty gritty, like details, I just don't think it's healthy, because you're already in that traumatic state. And then to asking some of those details will then give you more visuals in your head that you just can't get out of. And so I definitely ask if I had a question or if I had something that I felt like I needed to know, I would definitely ask. I always asked. And then depending on what it was, we would discuss like, well, why do I want to know this? And I think that's a good place for whoever is betrayed to ask those questions of like, why do I need to know this?
Yeah.
Because it can be super painful, and it is really painful. And I just don't think it's needed a lot of times.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible for someone to live in a healthy way? Like, let's just say you guys are on a healing journey, and then 5 years down the line, for some reason, something like is revealed that 15 years ago, there was this incident or this person that was not part of our disclosure process. Like, do you think you could live in a healthy manner with that?
I think so. I mean, if you've done the work, beforehand, I think you can. And it depends on, again, that's why doing a disclosure and doing it the way they do it is so important, because they go through a timeline with that person. So Carl had to go through, like, you go from the beginning of your sexual past, and then anything that's like along that line is kind of what's talked about. And it doesn't go into detail necessarily, but you're able to ask the questions with a therapist there so you can get that healing. As painful as it is, I just think that part is super healing in the long run. It's painful when you're in it, obviously. It's awful. But I think, there's that thing, time heals. It does, but it does if you do the work, like you have to be able to do the processes of getting that healing, to see results. Otherwise you will live, I think, with questions, and you don't want to live with questions. I have no questions for Carl about any of that, because I know it all.
Yeah, that's really good. What do you think the end game is of staying, if there is one?
I think the end game in staying is building a healthy, strong, intimate relationship with each other and building it honestly. I think when you have an honest relationship, that's where the intimacy comes. And I think for a lot of years, for me, I thought we had that. But when you actually are able to talk honestly with your spouse and you're able to tell your deepest, darkest secret or your whatever's going on, and you know that there's no judgment coming the other way or no shame is going to come back at you for your, whatever you have to say. I think that's the beautiful part of a strong relationship is being able to have that freedom. And I know that we both feel that. We're both very free in our relationship to be ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of years I didn't feel that. So on this side, being able to say, hey, I'm fucking angry at you, and him being able to take it, or like, just all those little things, like having the questions or the thoughts and being able to be in a space where it's not judged is really beautiful. And then for my kids to see that, my kids to be able to see how far we've come and the process, and them knowing that marriage isn't perfect, but you can, have a great, beautiful relationship if you put the work in.
Esther Perel, who's like one of the kind of most famous psychotherapists in the world, wrote like a book called The State of Affairs in 2018, which was like about infidelity. And so she talked kind of about this term of like post-traumatic growth, and like that, like you are creating, like your first marriage ended, right? And then you're like creating like a second marriage.
Yep, 2.0 we call it.
And she talked about that it's like you don't wish like infidelity like on anyone, right? And but like what could happen despite of that, despite that circumstance, could be very powerful
Very.
in the end. And I'm just sensing a lot of that from you. And
Oh
just,
yeah, we feel like we went on this whole new process of learning about each other again, and it's like a dating season again, you know, when you go through that like intimate space of really getting to know each other. That's what is beautiful about marriage 2.0.
Yeah.
Is that you get that. A lot of people don't get that, and I hate that for some people. But I think it is Esther that says you can be married more than once to the same person. And I think that's really beautiful, because I think you really get the true side of someone when you're in that 2.0.
Yeah.
You know, because there's just nothing left. It's like it's either this or
reflecting
nothing.
back from like kind of marriage 2.0, what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions people have about infidelity in general?
I think one of the biggest ones, especially for women, is if I'm not having a lot of sex with my husband or wife or whatever the situation is, they're going to cheat on me. That's a big one I get a lot. I know that if I don't have sex with my husband that he's going to cheat. I'm like, that's actually not true. Like, so that's a big one for women to understand. Like, it doesn't matter, you know, how beautiful or how much, you know, effort and all of that stuff, which is great, but it's not the reason infidelity happens. So that's been one. What's another one? I think, yeah, the other one would be that people like once infidelity happens that there can't be healing afterwards. So I hope that changes in the years to come. And I hope that that's something that we can help people with, because I know there's a lot of people that have gone through and are going through what we have gone through and haven't found that healing on the other side. And they also have had a worse experience than us. It's just not public.
Yeah, we talked about how, I mean, because 50% of the population has experienced some level of interaction with this topic of infidelity, I feel like if you swing the pendulum the other way, like I think our culture has went down this route of like, oh, monogamy is not realistic, or even people are like, oh, you should consider open marriages or stuff like this. So since there's a lot of people listening to this, I just kind of wanted to get your like take on like what you think of that bent, the way that culture is going.
I mean, there's definitely a thought that goes through your head of like, oh my gosh, is marriage lost? Like, if we can't make it, can anyone? You know, like, so I think it's sad that it happens so often. I just pray that people get the help they need, because you don't just like cheat on your spouse just for fun.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe people do. I don't know many that do that would do it like that. I feel like there's always some sort of brokenness that's happened in their childhood or in their past. And I think the more that people can get help for their childhood trauma and their pain, I think that marriages could be saved in a lot of those spaces, like, because it can be really beautiful. But I think there's just so much shame and so much things not talked about when it comes to infidelity and just your own brokenness as a child. I think a lot of, from my experience, a lot of people that I've talked to, it starts there. There's some sort of brokenness that's happened. It doesn't have to be sexual necessarily, but I just think it's a huge part of it.
That's really good. What about the people like who often when there's an affair that happens, you know, rightfully so, like the person who committed the infidelity gets a lot of backlash, and so do you think it's like a shared thing in a relationship of why that happened, or is it like 100% on one person or whatever? Like, how do you think about that dynamic?
I think, again, it depends on the situation. In our situation, it was definitely more his side. It was more on him than me.
Yeah.
But I still had to, like, he will say, you know, she did nothing wrong. I still have to take responsibility for me in this relationship. And I don't take any blame for it at all. But I did want to do the work and go to therapy, because a lot of people have been like, why did you have to go to therapy? And why did you have to work on yourself? Because I want to be a better person as well. Like, I want I wanted to heal, and I wanted to get to some of the root issues in myself. It's the same, like codependency can happen in person who's like married to an alcoholic or a drug addict, all these different things. Like you got to get to the root of like some of those reasons of why. And I just think it's a healthy space to be able to work on yourself.
That's really
outside of, again, like I said, we didn't stay in this to save our marriage.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone should stay because it's the godly thing to do. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like I mean, go if you have, and especially if they're not changing and they're not fixing. It's the same with an alcoholic or a drug addict. If they're not doing the work to change and fix it, then you got to go. You deserve better. Life is too short to live in a painful relationship.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
You mentioned the godly thing again. I think that's a good segue to kind of just touch on faith and where that fits into this entire thing, because that's such a big thing. I mean, with your specific situation, you were married to somebody who was on the stage all the time talking about God as pastor, all that stuff, and so did that make the situation like kind of stranger for you, and even how you were making sense of your own faith?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily like I didn't look at him and be like, what the heck? It wasn't about him in that sense. It was more for me, the pain when it came to my faith. I was angry at God, honestly, because I had spent my whole life loving the church. Started out as a youth leader in our church in Sydney at Hillsong. Like I've been a part of Hillsong pretty much my whole life. And so the pain for me was firstly from not feeling protected by my church family, especially when, churches say a lot, we're family, like welcome home or welcome to the family. I'm like, it's actually not a family, So I think churches need to do better in that sense. And then for me, I had a lot of work to do just building my relationship with God again. Like I was angry. Like we would go to church when we were in Florida, and it was a beautiful church. Like it was amazing. The pastors loved us and protected us while we were there, and they were awesome. But for me, standing in church, I couldn't sing for the first probably 3 years.
Oh my gosh.
Of being in church. I just hated it. But I also know that church is beautiful, and it's not the church that hurt me. Do you know what I mean? So it's this weird balance of like, people talk about church hurt and all of that. And I'm like, I just refuse to stay in church hurt. That like the people that were supposed to love me the most and protect us, they didn't. But I've healed and I've moved on from that. I'm like, okay, but not all churches like that. And it doesn't have to be like that. And I can also protect myself so it's not like that, But I go because I love church as a community, and church is where we can come and worship and hear the word, and we can grow and we can have beautiful relationships with other people that are broken. And I think for me, church is important, but the biggest part was just building back my relationship with God. Like I was just angry for a long time because I felt like, why me? I was like, all I did was, want to build church and love people and love God and all that stuff. And then this happens to me, like, why me, And that's a big question in my own head for a long time, was like, what the hell is my life? Like, how did this happen to me? Is this real? So church for a long time was really painful. And then when we moved to Tulsa, we're in a great church. It's mostly Black. And so it's a completely different culture to what I'm used to. And that was beautiful. So for me, being able to find something that wasn't the same as Hillsong necessarily. So that's been really fun, and it's been fun for my kids. And that's where I was able to find some freedom again, was like, okay, not all church is the same. And I'd only known one church culture. And so for me, unlearning a lot of unhealthy things that were like put in me as a young kid all the way through, it's been beautiful to have something different and to see that unfold and to see my kids enjoy church. And, you know, there's still some songs sometimes that my kids will be very triggered by. Like if there's a Hillsong song that's played that they remember from when they were little, it's still like can be painful and all of that kind of stuff. But so, like anything Hillsong for me is still, I still enjoy it. Like I still love the songs. I still love the people. Like I've grown through some of that. And I refuse to live my life broken and bitter because I just don't think it's healthy for my mind and my body. And I want to live like I've done enough work to know that like your body holds a lot of trauma and pain. And if you don't deal with it, it doesn't go anywhere. So for me, I've just wanted to be the best version of myself. And so whatever that's had to look like, that's what I've done, you know, from reading books that are super painful to read, or to like talking to therapists that I don't want to face that, you know, but I know I've had to do some of that to be free and to heal.
What have you learned, like your perception of faith, your interaction with faith? How has that grown and evolved as now that you're kind of here today?
I think it's still the same. Like I still believe everything that the Bible says. Like I love Jesus. I love all of that. I definitely had put a wall up probably with some of the things that people, you know, from a pulpit would say and how that's perceived for other people and the importance of going to church. Like when we lived in Florida, we both had like 9-to-5 jobs and Sunday would roll around and I'm like, I'm not going, like, this is my weekend. Like we have 2 days off. And it gave me a really good, fresh perspective on church for people that come, like the regular Joe that comes on a Sunday. And, you know, we used to say it all the time, like, thank you for coming, you know, especially when we lived in New York. Like getting to church anywhere or doing anything in New York is like, it's always a trek, you know, like getting on a subway or walking or whatever you had to do, like everything's, it's just a lot, you know? So we always made sure we did that. But you still had this thing of like, make sure you're at church on Sunday and this push for always like people coming. And I look at that differently now for sure.
Yeah.
I think church is beautiful and it's important, but I don't think it's like, if you don't go, you're not going to grow and like be closer to God.
Yeah.
I don't like any of that side of stuff anymore. And that's the type of thing that I think we would do a lot differently is some of that stuff that was ingrained in us. Like church is like, you have to be there on Sunday.
I don't even know where that came from. I mean,
I don't either. Yeah. I think it's a leader thing where you want people to come and because you know it's going to, like service is going to be great. It's going to be fun. You don't want people to miss out. So I think it comes from a genuine place. But at the same time, it's like I think you put pressure on people to feel like if they miss out on a service, it's not good, you know? And
it's like
sometimes
FOMO.
life's hard and you don't want to drag the kids to church on a Sunday, you know? Like, but there would be weeks where I'm like, oh my gosh, I understand why, you know, my friends couldn't come on Sunday. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot to... And it's a few hours out of your day. You know, we would always say that. It's just a couple of hours on a Sunday. But it's like, yeah, but this is my Sunday. Like, this is my day off, you know? Yeah. So I think that brought a different perspective for us just being like the normal churchgoer. So I enjoyed that. I enjoy that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're really hitting on a chord of just, we've kind of lost the definition of what this thing that started 2,000 years ago originally meant. And kind of what you were seeking when this whole crisis happened is what church was supposed to be, like the community of people around you and how that interacts with your daily life and just walking with those people. And then, you do have, you know, gatherings of larger groups of people, but then the hyper emphasis on that is like kind of
I just think it could change a little bit. And I think God's doing some stuff in that space with, you know, things that have happened the past few years with churches and the stuff that is coming out. There's so much unhealthy things that are coming to the surface, and I think it's all for the better, you know. So I'm excited to see where the church ends up going, you know, as it progresses. And I think it's healthy for change. And, you know, as hard as it was and as sad as it is that, you know, Hillsong happened the way it did and the way it kind of broke down for a while, it's like I pray that they've learned from some of that stuff and they've changed it. I have no idea. I don't really, know what's going on there at all. But yeah, I just think there's so many other ways that we can do church and community.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, we've shared so much, so much vulnerability, so much courage to share today, and so much wisdom for people. And so a couple of closing comments on speaking to a couple of different types of people who might be listening right now. And so let's start with the women specifically who have reached out to you and who maybe have experienced infidelity or cheated on. Do you have any kind of words of wisdom for them?
Yeah, I think I always ask if someone reaches out to me, I always ask if they're talking to someone, if they're getting help. So I think that's the first step, is like getting help for yourself, because usually a lot of women ask me, where should I send my husband, or do you have a therapist for my husband? I'm like, that's your husband's job. If he wants to fix him, he needs to do it. You do not step in and do that for him. Mm. Again, that's like a super codependent wifey thing for people to do. So for me, like Carl, I didn't have to do anything. Like Carl, when everything, it was a Sunday, I think Monday night, he was gone. Like he went the next day, he called Bob Goff, he called Miles at Onsite. Like he was out. Like he went straight away and got help. And then from there, he did all of that therapy, all of the things. Like I didn't have to do any of that. So I think that's super important for women to know, is that if he's not doing the work, then that's a huge red flag, and it might be time to peace out.
That's good.
But I think that's the big one. I always ask that first when women reach out to me.
That's good.
It's like, who is he told, and what are his responses?
And then what about the person who's currently living in secret, has yet to reveal their infidelity? It's
going to come out. The secrets, that you just can't keep them forever. You can't for yourself. It's like super unhealthy, but I think that, the Bible's pretty clear on that as well. Be sure, I don't know, is this a scripture? Be sure your sins will find you out. My dad always used to say that to me. I think it's a scripture. It's something along those lines, but I truly believe that. I think when there's secrets and there's things that you're keeping hidden, it's going to come out. And if there's things that you can't tell your spouse, that's a problem. So if there's things that you're keeping in secret, I think Carl's therapist said this to us as well. If you can't come home and tell your wife what you did that day, that might be a problem. It's good. Definitely a problem. So I think that's a huge one, is like, so I know that there's people in our position that are just praying stuff doesn't come out. It's going to come out. Unfortunately, it just is. And it'll come out either with you doing it and coming clean, or it's going to come out the really sucky way as well. It all sucks, but I know on this side of the pain and the last 3.5 years, almost 4 years that we've gone through this, I would beg people to come clean, because it's so beautiful on this side. When you have that freedom to live free, like seeing his face now as opposed to 3.5 years ago, 3 years ago, and the pain just in his eyes and the way he carried himself, he's a completely different person because he's free and he has nothing hidden.
And then lastly, what about people who have lost their belief in marriage because they believe, that infidelity or cheating or a broken marriage is just inevitable? What would you say to them?
I can understand that pain, absolutely. And I think you'll never know the beauty in a relationship until you give over all that trust. And it's scary, and it's a faith step, and it's but to have a real deep relationship with anyone, you have to be vulnerable, you have to be open, and you have to feel safe in that place to do that. And if you can find that person, or you have that person, I think it's a really beautiful place to get to. And if you don't have that, or you feel like you have that but it's not quite there, go get help for it, because there's so much help out there. And if 2 people are doing the work, it's really wonderful.
That's great.
And really beautiful.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you
for being here. This is
Thanks
so
for
wonderful.
Having me.
Yeah.
I hope it helps. I hope it helps some people.
It will.
Yeah. Thank you.